She'd been thinking it for weeks, actually feeling it for a lot longer. That maybe it was all just another system dressed up as truth. Not just the gurus or the books, but the practices, the meditations, the entire system of seeking and healing marketed as awakening. But how do you say that to people who still believe, especially when they believe in you? Here she sat in a Zoom room filled with the very people she'd once helped assemble. Her conscious crew, her mirror tribe, her circle. The ones who used to speak her language, the ones still lit up, sharing new breakthroughs like sacred treasures, quoting Eckhart Tolle, praising Dispenza, unpacking the Four Agreements like souvenirs from sacred lands. And she couldn't fake it anymore. She was exhausted. Not by the people, she loved the people, but by the pressure to still feel excited. It's not that she couldn't relate. Of course she could. She'd been there. She was still with the group, but no longer of the group. So she nodded and smiled and tried to stay open, but it was getting harder to pretend. Because lately her quiet had nothing to do with presence. It was more like emptiness, fatigue, a kind of stillness that didn't feel sacred, just blank, maybe even numb. And when they finally said, "Linda, what about you?" the facade broke. She answered reluctantly, but honestly, "I've done it all. I've followed every script and every system, traditional and spiritual. I've sat in every version of myself they told me to find. And I'm starting to think it's all a gimmick." The room was piercingly quiet. These weren't just people on a screen. They were her people. They'd grown together, cried together, held space for each other. But this wasn't another breakthrough. It was a break, actually more like a rupture. And nobody had words. Maybe they were trying not to take it personally. Maybe they were wondering if she was okay. Or maybe they were afraid she had spoken out loud what some had only dared feel in passing. Because what if it wasn't just her? What if others had felt this too, quietly, shamefully, fleeting, and pushed it down? But she let them feel it, let the words linger, didn't rush to fill the silence. She sat in it, as they sat with the possibility that the spell of awakening might wear off. "Hi, my name is Zara, and this may or may not be about me. But if you're still listening, it's probably about you too. Let's deepen Linda's experience, not to dismiss the path, but to prepare you for the part of the journey no one warned you about. So sit tight. We're going there." Linda was not drained for holding space. She was drained from trying to stay excited about it. Everyone else was still finding breakthroughs, still quoting teachers, still leaning in. But for her, the fire was gone. She didn't get triggered anymore, no, but she didn't get stirred or excited about anything either. That silence she carried, it wasn't presence. It was numbness, a kind of dull stillness that looked like peace but felt like disconnection. And this numbness, it's not failure, it's a side effect, one that almost no one talks about. Because the same path that promised liberation sometimes leads into a zone of sedation, where not feeling becomes the norm, where non-reactivity becomes emotional shutdown, where even joy gets quieter and then fades. So many get stuck here, not because they did it wrong, but because no one told them this was a part of it. When awakening becomes avoidance, the path stops being a way home and starts becoming a quiet prison. Most of us didn't come to this work because life was light. We came because something in us was hungry, hungry for peace, hungry for meaning, hungry to belong. So we went searching. We read the books. We studied the systems. We memorized the language of better. At first, it works. Now, let's be honest about something. Part of what makes this so tricky is that the tools do work. People are healing. People do grow. The practices, they help. until they don't. Because there's a fine line between being receptive and being susceptible. And most of us don't know when we've crossed it. We start with awakening, we end up waiting to finally be high vibe enough, healed enough, ready enough, waiting to arrive somewhere we were told already belonged to us. This isn't about tearing it all down, but consider this a signal, a flare of clarity in the fog. Even something that begins as sacred can slowly become just another system. Most of us didn't come to this work because life was liked, but eventually, the tools that once felt like freedom can start to feel like obligation. Internal conflicts creep in. You couldn't be upset without lowering your vibration. You had to manage grief to prove how far you'd come. Tired? Maybe you hadn't done enough inner work. Confused? Maybe your frequency was off. And slowly, you stopped reaching for what felt true and started reaching for what felt acceptable. So then we have to ask, what's really different from what we left? The packaging changed, but the pressure, the performance, the implied hierarchy? Sometimes the systems are different, but the strategies are the same, to divert you from remembering who you truly are. Now, this is not to say that it was all fake or that you were fooled. It's about what happens when the very thing that helped us starts to hold us. Because every stage gave us something. Every practice helped us through something. And for a time, we needed them. They gave shape to our pain. They gave names to our ache. They gave us something to hold on to. But eventually, it turns from medicine to maintenance. And here's how you know. When you're no longer doing it because it's helping, you're doing it because you don't know who you are without it. You're keeping up the habits, but nothing's really shifting anymore. And because it still looks like growth, just the very act of doing, then nobody questions it. But you're not free. You're just busy. You're not changing. You're just coping more skillfully. No one tells you that it's okay to leave something that helped. No one tells you that outgrowing a space is not betrayal, it's evolution. So you stay in rooms that are too small for you because no one said it was time to walk out. This isn't rejection, it's recognition. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a judgment on where you are. If the tools are still serving you, that's sacred. If practices still help you meet yourself, keep them close, because we're all remembering at different rhythms. Some of us are still discovering truths in the work. Some of us are outgrowing it. Some of us are doing both at the same time. There's no prize for leaving early, and there's no shame in staying longer. This isn't about hierarchy, it's about honesty. So if you are here and still feel held by a system, this is not a warning to run. It's just a whisper to keep listening. Because remembering doesn't come with a general map, and no one else gets to tell you when you've arrived. Now let's broaden this thing. Because what if you were never meant to stay in any of it? Not the teachings, not the rituals, not even the peace that showed up for a season. What if every system was only meant to bring you to the next layer of yourself? Every teacher, every truth, every method, every tool, it was all real for the version of you that needed it. But growth, it doesn't come with permission slips. And sometimes the very thing that helped us survive become the very thing we hide behind. They say keep practicing, keep aligning, keep devoting. Stay loyal, but almost no one, because few have reached this point, ever says you're allowed to outgrow this. You're allowed to know when it's over. And that knowing, that gnosis, the one that comes quietly without proof, without a second opinion, that's remembering. And if something in you just recognizes that, but you're still not sure what it is, you are remembering, and I created something for that. It's called Your Sovereignty Guide, a short, potent companion to help you name what's always been yours. If you feel a tug for it, you'll find a link in the description below. Because once you start remembering, you'll begin to see what was never yours in the first place. Now, this part is where all of this lands. Self-help and spirituality were never built to free you. They were built to keep you seeking. Let's call it what it is. Self-help is an industry. Spirituality has become a brand. And healing, it's been turned into a never-ending project. Not because the teachers were bad, not because the tools had no value, but because the machine behind them profits from your pursuit, not your arrival. They sold you freedom packaged in moon rituals, mantras, and morning routines. And at first, it helped. It really did. But somewhere along the way, you started working harder at your healing than you ever did at your wounding. And once you see that, once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. And that is not failure. That's the fracture where clarity gets in. So if you're feeling any parts of this, or you start to feel any parts of this, here's what you need to know. It's not collapse. It's probably completion. Not because the path didn't matter, but because you are no longer who you were when you began it. And no one prepares you for that moment when the tools stop working and you don't need them anymore. There's no graduation speech, no badge, just a quiet truth that says, we've gotten what we came for. That isn't giving up. It's growing out. You don't need a new program. You don't need a reboot. You need space to pause, to listen, to remember. Because the next step, once you begin to remember, it doesn't come from outside of you. It starts within you. And if you're resonating with this, then maybe it's right now, in this breath, right here, not with answers, but with honesty. Now here's where you truly get to breathe. Because you've done the work. You've followed the thread. You've asked the hard questions. And if the path feels like it's ending, maybe it is. Not as failure, not as loss, but as remembering. Remembering the part of you that never needed to prove you were evolving. The part that knew, quietly, when the resonance faded. You don't need permission to leave the room. You don't need validation to know what's real for you now. You just need to trust that your clarity is enough. Not everyone will understand, and that's okay. You're not leaving people behind. You're just no longer carrying what no longer fits. This isn't abandonment. It's alignment. You're not escaping. You're arriving. And if any part of this spoke to a truth inside of you, not one you were taught, but one you remembered, then hold it close. Let it settle. And if it feels right, let it be the beginning of a new kind of freedom. This is Remembering with Zara.